My friends, tonight I want to speak about something that lives inside every human heart, yet too often we bury it beneath doubt, hesitation, and fear. That thing is courage. Courage over fear. The belief that no matter how impossible the road looks, no matter how dangerous the enemies appear, no matter how unprepared the world says you are, you can still rise, and you can still lead. When I think of this truth in our modern world, one name comes to mind: Ibrahim Traoré, a young man only 34 years old who stepped forward in a storm of chaos against powerful forces, against fear itself, and showed his people that destiny is not decided by age or by fear, but by courage. Now, I want us to go deeper. I don't want this to be just a story about one leader in Africa. I want it to be a mirror for your life, because every single person here has moments where fear whispers louder than courage. Fear says, "You're too young, you're too small, you're too late, you're not ready." And courage, that quiet voice inside, simply answers, "Go." The weight of fear. Let's start with fear. Fear is the oldest enemy of human progress. Think about it. Entire nations have been enslaved not just by armies, but by fear. Fear keeps people silent when injustice is loud. Fear keeps workers in jobs that drain their souls. Fear keeps young leaders from stepping forward when their nations cry out for change. But fear is also clever. It disguises itself. Sometimes fear wears the mask of wisdom. Have you heard people say, "Don't take that risk, be realistic. Wait until you're older. Wait until you're stronger"? That's fear talking. When Ibrahim Traoré took leadership of Burkina Faso at just 34, the world looked at him and said, "Too young, too inexperienced, too dangerous." Fear wanted him to believe that. Fear wanted his people to believe that. But he didn't bow. He looked at his nation, drowning in insecurity, surrounded by powerful enemies, and he chose courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. Now let's be clear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the face of fear. When Traoré stood up, do you think he felt nothing? Do you think he wasn't aware that older, richer, more powerful enemies would target him? Of course he knew. He knew the risks. He knew that standing for his people meant standing against powers far larger than himself. But here's the lesson: he chose to lead anyway. And that is the essence of courage. It doesn't deny fear. It simply refuses to be ruled by it. The weight of age. There is another layer to his story. Age. We are conditioned to think leadership must come with gray hair, with long sommets, with decades of experience. But Ibrahim Traoré shattered that illusion. At 34, he stood taller than men twice his age, not because he lived longer, but because he lived braver. Age is not destiny. There are old cowards, and there are young lions. There are elders who surrender to fear, and there are youth who rise with courage. What defines destiny is not the number of years you've lived, but the depth of courage you are willing to live by. And this should speak to you directly. Some of you here may think you're too young to lead. Others may think you're too old to start over. Both are lies. Destiny is not a slave of age. Destiny belongs to the courageous. Everyday courage. Now, let me step away from politics for a moment. Because this is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about you, your family, your community. Courage over fear is not only tested on battlefields or in government offices. It is tested every single day. Courage is the young student who dares to pursue education when his family says, "Stay home, it's useless." Courage is the mother who stands against tradition when it hurts her daughter's future. Courage is the worker who says, "I will not bow to corruption, even if it costs me my job." Courage is you, choosing to believe in your dream, even when fear says, "Don't try, you'll fail." Traoré's courage is simply a spotlight reminding us what is possible when ordinary people refuse to surrender to fear. History favors the brave. History proves this again and again. Alexander the Great was leading armies in his 20s. Joan of Arc, a teenager, stood against empires. Nelson Mandela, though older when he emerged as president, spent his youth enduring prison with courage. Every great transformation in history begins when someone says, "Yes, I feel the fear, but I will walk anyway." And let me tell you something: fear is temporary, but regret is forever. Imagine if Traoré had said, "No, I'm too young, maybe later." He would have lived safe for a while, but his nation would have sunk deeper into crisis, and history would never remember his name. But by choosing courage, he became more than a leader. He became a symbol. The enemies of courage. Whenever someone chooses courage, enemies rise. And I'm not only speaking of political enemies. I'm speaking of the enemies we all face. Doubt whispers, you can't do it. Failure says, see, you tried once and it didn't work. Society says, stay in your place. Fear says, what if you get hurt? What if you lose everything? But the truth is this: the greatest enemy is not outside you. It's inside you. If you defeat fear within, no enemy outside can conquer you. This is the battlefield Traoré stepped into. Not just the battlefield of his nation, but the battlefield of the human spirit. And his victory reminds us courage can silence fear. Your call to courage. So now, I want to turn this back to you. Think about your own life. Where has fear been holding you hostage? Is it in your career, your relationships, your education, your faith? What decision have you been postponing because you are afraid of failing, afraid of judgment, afraid of stepping into the unknown? Today I ask you, choose courage, even if it shakes, even if your voice trembles, even if your knees are weak. Walk anyway, because the path of fear leads only to chains. The path of courage leads to freedom. The ripple effect of courage. And here's the beauty: when you choose courage, you don't just free yourself, you inspire others. When Traoré rose, young Africans everywhere saw him and said, maybe we too can rise. Maybe we too don't need to wait until we're old, until we're rich, until we're approved by others. Maybe we can begin now. That's what courage does. It multiplies, it spreads. Your single act of courage may unlock courage in 10 other hearts. Closing vision. So my friends, let us remember this: fear is a liar. Fear promises safety but delivers slavery. Courage is costly, yes, but it delivers freedom, dignity, destiny. Ibrahim Traoré's story is not just about one young leader. It is a reminder that inside every one of us lies the power to stand taller than our fears, to rise younger than the world expects, to lead stronger than the enemies predict. Courage over fear. That is the lesson. That is the call. That is the path to destiny. So tonight, when you leave this place, don't just admire Traoré. Don't just admire courage. Live it. In your own way. In your own battles. With your own people. And when fear whispers in your ear tomorrow morning, answer with these words: yes, I feel you. But you will not rule me. Courage is my master. Courage is my path. Courage is my destiny. Thank you.